WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany, often tasting rare and exotic whiskeys. Today I have a big box, Tullibardine, the Marquess Collection, vintage 2008, bottle 2022, and they call it here their triple port cask finish. Now, there are actually 4 different types of port, if you did not know. We have a white port, which I like from certain producers there. We have a rosé port, which is also very interesting. Then there's the red Tawny port, which is the real port with aged in oak. And there's the ruby port, which is more aged in steel tanks so that it retains the bright ruby red color. So they take 3 of these. They take the white, the Tawny, and the ruby port finish, and they actually then do not mature it in 4 different casks. So bourbon at the beginning, ex-bourbon casks, but they actually take it and put it for an undisclosed time in those 3 different port casks. Some of it was in port, some of it was in tawny, some of it was ruby, and then they actually marry it all together and fill it up. Now this is 46%, which would lead me to believe that is non-chilled filtered. The color is a little bit reddish, which would lead me to believe that it is a natural color product. Yet nowhere on the bottle and nowhere on the box do they mention that. They do talk about a historic battle in 1715 as well as 1745, which, to be very honest, it interests us nerds nil, nothing, absolute. Why tell me about something that happened 300 plus years ago and forget to mention on your bottle and your box the real thing that's important, the whiskey inside the bottle? All right, so Tullibardine, please put, if it is natural color, on the bottle. Please put non-chilled filtered if it is on the bottle. And I think it is. I think it's natural color. I think it's non-chilled filtered. But without this information, I have to assume, unfortunately, because of the rules of SWA, that this is both non-chilled filtered and it has artificial coloring in it, which is a shame. All right, you're making good whiskey. Communicate with us the important things that we like. If I'm allowed to rant and rave for 1 little minute, you do mention the 3 type of port casks, yay. You do mention 2008 up to 2022, the age of this whiskey. But we freaks would like to know at least the finishing age. Is it 1 month? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? How long did you put it into the white port, the Tawny port, and the ruby port casks? Now, that's all I want to say. Now, when I taste this whiskey, and I'm going to do that in a moment, but before that, I'm going to compare it to something I've already done a video about. This is a German independent bottler called Douglas Thompson Single Malt Scotch Whisky. It's also from the Tullibardine distillery, yet it's younger. So it's a single barrel. It was distilled 2012. It was bottled 2021, and this is 53%. So what they did is they finished it in a Fino sherry quarter cask. All right, so 53% versus 46%. Now, why am I doing this? Just so I have another product here on the table from Tullibardine. Now, on the website of tullibardine.com, they do mention the fact here that this is the 12th limited edition in the Tullibardine Marquess Collection, and it marries together 3 types of port cask, which I mentioned: white port, tawny port, ruby port. The result is a delicately blushed peach spirit, which imbues a cacophony of sweet, fruity, and warming aromas and flavors. Talk about being vague. Fruity and warm aromas and flavors. All right, the nose delivers, now this is good, tart raspberries, and it is tart and sweet at the same time. Succulent black fruits. I know blackberries. What else is black? And perfectly balanced with a subtle hint of baked apple and cream caramel from the white port. Now, the Tawny port, aged in oak barrels. Wasn't everything aged in oak barrels? You're using barrels to finish this with, but okay, good. bringing layers of spiced oak, cloves, and cinnamon, which create a spicy and warm finish. Distilled 2008, bottled 2022. This unique expression is limited to just 18,278 bottles globally. And the Marquess Collection, which was launched 2016, is a nod to the famous historical figures who bore the Marquess of Tullibardine title in Scotland for centuries, and the rich history of the Tullibardine region. That's great. That's great. So you have a little bit of information at the end what this is all about. But on the box, on the bottle, unfortunately, there's hardly any information about the whiskey itself. And by the way, in your description, what does the ruby port actually add? We know that the white port adds this. We know that the Tawny port adds that. But you totally forgot to mention, if you're going to mention all three, what did the white port add? All right, so that's just Jason criticizing the bottler for not giving us all the information we want. All right, on the nose, I do get a not yet ripe. I don't get blackberry. I get raspberry. All right, so I get raspberry. They call it the nose delivers tart raspberries. They got that right. I get a little bit of a white, a little bit of vanilla cream sauce, that caramel. Maybe I could go for a little bit of that. It's like a apple pie with apple and cinnamon and so on. This is inviting. This is interesting. But I do get a tiny, tiny little bit of a acidity in here. And I do get a tiny, tiny little bit. And I am oversensitive to that sulfite, that sulfur moment in there. And that is something that is always a little bit of, oh, okay. You empty the cask in Portugal. You often have that sulfur candle you put in there so that the barrel do not spoil on the way when you transport it to Scotland. You could go around that with refrigerating the cask or only doing that in the wintertime and so on and so on. But at least one of those types of casks had some sulfur in it, unfortunately. It could have been the white, it could have been the port, it could have been the Tawny. So over here, I get there's a quarter cask. Quarter casks it's a very, very small cask, a fourth of the size of a butt, so 125 liters usually. I get more fresh oak here, and the Fino has a little bit of a salty maritime moment going on there, and that Fino sherry does come through here, and it's nicely balanced. But I'm not a big fan of Fino sherry, and so therefore this is not my favorite whiskey in the world. Let's try it. 46%. Cheers. Cilantro to your health. Mm. Mm. For me, it's borderline acceptable due to the sulfites, due to that sulfur moment. I have a um, effervescent. It's not bubbly. It's more of a tickling type of needle pricking allergic reaction to sulfur. And therefore, this is one of those whiskeys where it's like, it's slightly there. It's just a little bit. We do everything in the whiskey world to get rid of sulfur. That's why we use copper in our pots. And then we put sulfur into the cask that we use to finish the whiskey. That just makes me angry sometimes. And I'm getting that here. And that does knock this whiskey down a little bit in my evaluation. So sorry. Two questions now for you to comment on. Number one, do you know anyone else that has used all four types of port, the white, the rosé, the Tawny, and the ruby, or even three of them like we have here with the Tullibardine? I think, according to my research at the moment and my overview of whiskey, that is unique. I do not know anyone else has a triple port cask finish. Please write it down if anyone else has done that. I would love to know that. And my last question is, before I move on to the value for money and my evaluation of this whiskey, what is your favorite Tullibardine product? Now, the Marquess Collection, this is the 12th limited edition. They started back then in 2016, so they're bringing out basically two a year. It's very interesting. I really, really like what they're doing. I like how they're doing it. I love that Tullibardine has a price, 65 euros, not bad, for a minimum 13, when not even 14-year-old whiskey with this unique finish. So the value for money is actually almost there. Now, what I thought was a little bit, uh, it didn't disturb me, but it was like, um, it's 65 pounds at the distillery. Pounds to euro is a bad exchange course, and the VAT, the sales tax, as well as the alcohol tax, is much higher in Scotland than in Germany. So I'm used to having lower prices in Germany for the whiskey we get from Scotland than buying it in Scotland itself. I'm usually between about 10 and 20% cheaper in Germany due to those restrictions, including the problem of actually getting it over here with transportation. So whiskey should be cheaper in Germany due to these factors, auxiliary factors. And yet it's exactly the same price, 64 euros 90 here, 65 pounds directly from the distillery. And I was just like, well, I can go to the Netherlands, buy it for 60 euros. Okay, interesting. And so there's a little bit of the different prices within Europe that I kind of go, well, so some importers are getting a little bit more money, or keeping a little bit more money for themselves than the distillery actually is getting. And that kind of um, just doesn't feel perfectly okay, in my opinion. All right, what I did not do in my German video, which I like to do now, is to add a tiny little bit of water to this. This is 46%. I forgot to mention there's a certain creaminess to this. I do think that this is non-chilled filtered. It feels like it. All right, those fatty acids seem to still be in here. And there's also a little bit of a European chocolate oak moment. Now, there's not a thing as chocolate oak, but there's European oak that gets that chocolatey moment in going in there. Glendronach 12, for example, has that all the time for me. And I went online and I looked a little bit and was like, okay, good. For example, one of the shops, some of the distilleries in Germany actually use, is called oakbarrels.shop. Hey, they do have a ruby port wine barrel in American oak, and they also have here a Tawny port and a white port in American oak and European oak. So they do have European oak, white port barrel, European oak, French oak to be exact. And so there are products that use French oak seasoning casks. The industry itself, the port industry in Portugal, normally does not use, for example, for Tawny port, a European oak, because it would impart too much of the tannins. It'd be too astringent, especially if you leave it in there for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. I still remember the first time I was in Lisbon in Portugal, and we saw this the sign port wine tasting, and I went in the store and saw that, and I was able to have a little dram 2cl, such a glass like this. It was 40-year-old port. Cost me, I don't know, 12, 15 euros. It was worth every penny. It was so good. But it was really, really one of those exceptional moments in life. All right, so and now I have a bottle of 40-year-old, 50-year-old port I have in my cupboard over there, and it's just like, yeah, we do develop in life, don't we? I remember the first time I was like, wow. All right, Tullibardine with water. Mm-hmm. Mm. Good fruitiness, good complexity. Unfortunately, the sulfates, that sulfur, that gunpowder moment is going on here. A little bit of that fireworks, a little bit of matchstick, that type of sulfur, not the sulfur from the rotten eggs. Um, Nice chocolatey, good moment there. So whiskey base number, I think I mentioned it, 225337, and some people have actually said dark fruits, not turning overly sweet, slightly oily. There's oak, there's spice, there's vanilla, there's caramel. There's a little bit of the cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove going on in here. Um, it's that has a complexity, a little bit of depth. It's good. medium to long, lingering oak finish there. Sweetness, fruitiness, it's a solid C. On a good day, it would be a C plus. On a day that I'm oversensitive to sulfites and sulfur, it'd be a C minus. All right, so I'm going to give it a C plus in this moment and say, hey, nice, value for money, 65 euros for this age, for this type of product. I'm going to assume it's not natural color and non-chilled filter, so I'm going to give it a C for money, for price for money. It's absolutely okay. Put it on the bottle. Put it on the box, people. That's what we expect today. We are, especially with a limited edition thing like this an expression, these are the things a normal person does not buy in a grocery store. This is the thing we buy at a specialty shop, and we are the whiskey, I'm going to use the word connoisseurs that buy this bottle, and we today expect, want, and I'm going to use the word demand that information. So please do that in the future, Tullibardine, if anyone from Tullibardine ever watches this video. All right, so 2 questions. What is your favorite Tullibardine product, and what other whiskeys out there have the triple cask of port or even the quadruple cask of port with white, rosé, tawny, and ruby? WhiskyJason here. Thank you very much for liking, sharing, supporting, and telling others about this crazy guy over here in Europe tasting whiskeys you might not ever see. All the best. See you soon. Bye-bye.